Mr. DiBiase, this is Dustin Wilmus. How you doing today?
Very good. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's an honor to be speaking with you.
My pleasure.
Well, my co-host is in the studio here. He's going to be joining us in a minute, so just a heads up on that.
Okay.
Well, let's talk a bit about the new documentary you got coming out, The Price of Fame. Looks like it's the definitive look, at your life and career, but a lot more than that as well.
Absolutely. It's, the title, The Price of Fame. And again, I kind of qualify this and say it's what you make it. Ultimately, we're all the sum total of the choices we make. So, there's no blame put on the WWE or, it's kind of like fame. There's all kinds of fame. If you're a football player, basketball player, an actor, or whatever. I mean, you can be famous because you're a politician, or maybe not. but it's what you do with those things. And for me, my hope is that the people that come and view the film will walk away understanding that most of the things that we chase in life, because we chase after those things. Everybody, it's great. Like if you were famous and you could be a football player, basketball player, wrestler, actor, whatever. But not even just that. I mean, we chase after money. We chase after position. We chase after power, and we think if we have a big house and a nice car and we have all that stuff, that's going to bring us happiness. And reality is that those things will. They'll keep us pacified for a little while, but at the end of the day, the things that really matter, the things that are lasting, are strength of family, strength of character, strength of integrity. And I learned a lot of those lessons. I had them instilled in me as a very young man, and that's the story I tell. And then I pretty much abandoned them and got all full of myself for 20 years. And then through the my wife, discovered my infidelity, and that broke the water, and all of a sudden the cat's out of the bag, and then because I had fallen into line, it's like the old rock and roll songs, drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Well, we became like rock stars. We were traveling the world, Learjets, limousines, the whole 9 yards, and it was very easy to get caught up in without the accountability, and it's like a second being two different people, because what you're really doing is you're filling a void. Back to the fame thing. You go in a building and there's I wrestled in front of 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium. That's a pretty big thrill. But when that show was over, I had to go back to my hotel and sit in a city that I didn't know, in a hotel, like at four walls and a television set. Well, do that every day, and do that for the majority of your time. Like we were on the road 3 weeks out of every month.
Sure.
And that gets old, and that's where all those other things start to present themselves. And that's what this story is about. So, I'm a minister today, a faithful follower of Jesus Christ. I preach it all the time. But whether you are or you're not, that's what I'm saying about the price of fame. It's a story that I think will bring hope to some people if they're struggling in those areas, because my wife and I are closer today. We're closer friends today. I can say unequivocally, she's my very best friend, and it wasn't easy, and we had to work through it. And but because we were willing to, because number one, because my wife was willing to give me a second chance, a chance I would say right out I didn't deserve. So I have that today. People ask me all the time. They said, "Are you really a multimillionaire?" And I go, "Nope, I'm not." I said, but what I do have today that is priceless is I have the love and respect of my wife, my children, and have the unbelievable honor and privilege and joy of watching my grandchildren grow up. And had I not made a decision to change and to take the focus off of Ted and what all Ted wanted, and put the focus primarily on my family, and now as a man trying to be Christ-like, put the needs of other people ahead of my own. The ministry that I have now, Heart of David, we do sports camps, and we try to target inner city kids and kids who come from broken homes and things, to help give them the hope that that they should have, and the break that they should get. So I'm trying to give back. When at the end of the day, like one day I'm going to die, and hopefully my boys will stand over my carcass and eulogize me. And I don't want to be remembered simply as, Ted DiBiase was a wrestling legend and a Hall of Famer. I want to be remembered as a man who left a legacy that his children and his grandchildren could step into, and that legacy being one of selflessness instead of selfishness. And that's pretty much it. And the price of fame it tells that story. It's a story about a man and a woman and a marriage. It's a story about a father and his sons, and it's a story about redemption and forgiveness and hope. And I hope everybody out there gets a chance to go see it. It's a Fathom event. It's one day, November the 7th, and it will be in select theaters all over the USA. One-time showing, 7 p.m. in your time zone. If you go to thepriceoffame.com or to, I think, fathom.com and enter your zip code, you can find out what the theaters are in your area that will be showing the film. And it's really kind of surprising. I mean, when this whole project started, I didn't envision this happening. But, I thought, well, okay, we'll be able to take this, and as I minister it and go, and we'll be able to make it available on DVD and things like that. So now it's like 700 theaters across the country for a one-day deal, and we're talking to Netflix, and it's gotten bigger than any of us imagined. So I hope everybody that's listening, if you get a chance, go see The Price of Fame.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a great look at your life, and as you mentioned, so much more. And again, it's going to be here in Minnesota and several theaters around the Twin Cities area. And as you mentioned, maybe it'll be on DVD and Netflix sometime down the road. So that is awesome. I'll introduce you here now to my co-host, Ton, who just stepped in.
Hey there. How you doing?
Very good. How are you?
I just want to let you know you were a major part of my childhood, probably still as Dusty's as well. I believe you were Dusty's all-time favorite for all the time.
Well, I'm very flattered.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. So, but I want to talk about a lot of wrestlers. I guess have followed your lead and found God after wrestling. Did you have any kind of hand in that, or talked about kind of the journey, even just choosing to totally go that direction?
I have, in some ways, in some cases, I have had, like direct influence. Shawn Michaels, when Shawn's journey started, he said his wife started giving him books to read, and he started looking at things differently. And when I found out, I invited him to an athletes conference, a Christian athletes conference in Phoenix, and I think that was pretty much the icing on the cake. And quite frankly, George Steele was interviewed for the documentary. He's in the documentary, and not until I saw the interview that he gave did I realize that his spiritual journey started with hearing me share my story at a church. And so that was pretty remarkable. So there's been a few guys. Sting is another guy. Sting is strong in his faith today. If you hear Sting tell his story, there were a number of encounters that he had. One of them was me, and that was like he said I started connecting the dots, and I realized that God was trying to speak to me, and because all these things couldn't possibly have happened in the sequence that they did, by mistake, is the way he put it. So, yeah, there's been a few guys who I've been able to influence, and I think more just by, because there were a lot of skeptics, and when all this went down with my family, and this thing broke in 1992. And I go back to work, and I tell everybody, "Hey guys, I'm not going to the bars anymore. I'm not doing the stuff anymore. I've given my life to Christ. My wife has given me a second chance, and I'm going to take it." A lot of them were extremely skeptical. As a matter of fact, I think Lex Luger is also interviewed in the documentary, and today is also a very strong Christian, and he says flat out, he says, I just thought it was, Ted, he almost lost his wife. He's trying to save his marriage, he'll be back, that type of thing. But I didn't go back, and more than anything, I think that when people started noticing the genuine change in my life and my priorities, I think that had as much to do with helping other guys make a decision as anything.
Well, Ted, you mentioned the film is really kind of reconnecting with your family after your wrestling career. And, your son, Ted Jr., seems like he's really the one that got the ball rolling on the Price of Fame. Did he kind of, I guess, understand you a little better after he started wrestling and kind of understand, what your lifestyle was like?
I think so. I mean, back when all of this broke, and one of the things that my wife said to me was, in spite of what you have done to me, she goes, you are a wonderful dad, and your children hold you on a pedestal. And she goes, I don't want to destroy that. And she said, so until these boys are old enough to understand this, they don't know anything about it. It won't be spoken of. And so it wasn't, and then it was a couple of years probably before I ever started going to churches and sharing, and of course then in 2000 I stepped out into evangelism and ordained into that ministry through my church. But so my boys start hearing me share the story as I'm sharing it with the public in churches, and I just simply said, okay, God, if they need to have any other answers, they'll ask me the questions, and I'll wait for that. And what was funny is when we started this project, and the project started, Peter Fierro, who basically filmed all of this and put it together. I mean, his normal job is he does wedding photography and video, so he documents weddings. And he came to interview me as a favor to a friend. This is like 5 years ago, and it was what they call a shoot interview. In other words, we're not asking you questions about wrestling storylines. We're talking to you about real life. Well, you start talking to me about real life, I'm going to start telling you what God did in it. And in Pete's own words, he said, at the time, I was the backslidden son of a minister. And Ted's story my story just resonated with him, and caused a turnaround in his own life. And so anytime he lives in New Jersey, and so anytime I was in the New York area and speaking, he would come, and we became friends. And then he just approached me one day about wanting to do this. And I said, well, okay, I mean, I've told my story for a long time, but it's never been on film. And that's when my son came along and said, let's put a twist on this, Dad. He says, how about we tell the story? It's your story, but as seen through my eyes, or our eyes, and my son's. And it was actually doing the documentary that brought my two boys to ask me questions that they had never asked before. And I mean, I don't know. And they in private conversation, they said, well, we saw that you and Mom were fine. We figured, and I don't know if it was just maybe I just don't want to go there, but the whole project I think brought it to a light. But and it's seen as you watch it. You watch it unfold. But a lot of wounds healed, and a lot of questions answered. And I think if people who have no faith, they just they're a total atheist. If you can come away with this, you can come away with this with the understanding that there's hope. That there's nothing that's impossible. The salvation of my marriage and the relationship that I have with my sons today is second to none. And again, what's really important in life, and that's the irony, is like a guy who played the $1 Million Man, whose God basically was money and that thought he could buy anybody or anything, is now saying to you that in real life, it ain't there. You can have all of that you want, But when you die, I've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer. You ain't taking it with you. And what do you really have? See, that was the thing that hit me. I was at the height of my fame. I was more famous and than I ever imagined I was going to be. And my gosh, my likeness made it into action figures, and they put me on video games and all that stuff. And when I realized that I had put my family at risk and had been so selfish, it was a slap in the face. It was more like a bat to the head. And how could I possibly be such a big jerk? And I'm probably going to lose this. And I believe by God's grace I didn't. And I'm never going to go back there. And that's what I hope people can take away from this, is that there's hope. There's hope and forgiveness, and there is redemption if you look for it.
So we've got to ask a little bit about the $1 Million Man character. We've always heard that Vince says he would have portrayed it if he were a wrestler. Did that put any extra pressure on you during the time, knowing that, or is that even true?
Not really. I mean, the way it was explained to me, it's from the first meeting we had. He was called away for a phone call, and I was sitting there with Pat Patterson, who was Vince's right-hand man for a long time. And Pat simply said, Ted, he says, here's what you need to know. If Vince were going to be a character in his own show, this is who he'd be. This is his creation. And so he said, and knowing that, you know how hard he's going to push it, and which basically was telling me, if you accept this, you're going to be one of the top heels in our industry. And that's what Vince did. And what I started to notice when I left the WWE and Vince started involving himself more in the show as opposed to being in the back, he basically became that character. He's like the CEO of the WWE, and the rich boss who's bullying everybody, and he became the character. He really did.
Well, Ted, you had almost like two different careers in a way. The $1 Million Man stuff, of course, with the WWE, but before that, an entirely different, kind of career. Are you finding now that fans are coming up to you and maybe discovering some of that early stuff now with the WWE Network and all that available?
Oh gosh, yeah. I hear it all the time. They're going back and they're looking at I spent not all of, but the better part of the first 12 years of my career I spent with Bill Watts in Mid-South Wrestling. And to this day, I have the greatest respect for Bill Watts in terms of his understanding of the psychology of wrestling and what we do. The storytelling and the things that he did were just phenomenal. He's one of the absolute best. Just like I would, whenever I left Mid-South, I would always compare it. It's like I'd compare every other territory that I went to Bill's, and none of them, that's why I kept going back there, because it was the best at the time, in my opinion. And so I learned that, I give a great deal of credit to Bill Watts for my understanding of the psychology of wrestling and what we do and why we did it. And a lot of that stuff has changed. Everything evolves and changes. What I hear from fans a lot today is, fans again from my era, too much talk, not enough action. Tell me a good story in the ring. I don't want to hear the stuff, and I don't want to hear the drama. I don't want to hear the soap opera. I want to see the action. So, and that was our era. And many, will say, and I've heard this a lot. Of course, I'm hearing it from people that came from that era now. But I do hear again from a lot of young people, and it's just pretty remarkable. Man, I've got the network, and I'm going back and I'm watching all that stuff. Mid-South. You guys were great. That was great wrestling. That was great entertainment. And in terms of the quality of the production, it wasn't even close. But they're not talking about the quality of the production. They're talking about the action, the story that they're seeing. And so that kind of proves my point.
Yeah, definitely. For guys like Ton and I growing up in Minnesota, we didn't really get to see a lot of that. We were more AWA country here, so it's great to go back and finally discover that stuff for the first time.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like, AWA. I never actually got to come to the AWA, but Vern Gagne and my dad wrestled each other in college. My dad was at Nebraska and Vern in Minnesota, and then so that relationship carried over into professional career. And again, back in those days, in the territorial days, I mean, as people say, well, where are you from? Where'd you live? And I said, well, I lived all over the country because I was the son of a wrestler, and you would go regional, So that and at one point when we went back to Nebraska, where my dad's originally from in Omaha, I guess Omaha was part of, at that time, AWA, I think. I mean, I know that Vern came down and was on the television programming in Omaha all the time.
Well, Ted, we won't ask you wrestling questions all day, but, as we mentioned, we were huge fans of yours, and I did want to ask you, your memories of working with Andre, because around that time, when you bought the belt and, the refs had the plastic surgery and, the tournament and all that stuff, that was probably our favorite time in wrestling.
Oh, yeah. It's funny that the Saturday night main event, which was a very special event for me because I grew up in wrestling. I'm second generation. It's been my whole life. And then here I am. I am one of the key figures in this show. And this show that night was the first time that professional wrestling was on live national network television since the 1950s. And, of course, the story was the rematch between Hulk and Andre from WrestleMania 3. I had said, I'm going to prove to the world I can buy everything, including a world title. And until I got to the building, I didn't know that Dave Hebner had an identical twin. And it was classic. It was a very special time for me.
Well, again, The Price of Fame is coming out on November 7th. And again, at Fathom.com, you can get tickets. And numerous Twin Cities area theaters around here will have it. So, again, Ted, it looks great. We've had a chance to check it out. And I hope maybe it makes its way to DVD or Netflix. And some of the other fans, if they can't catch it November 7th, they'll get a chance to see it.
Yeah, well, those talks are already happening. So, I'm hoping everybody gets out on the 7th. And if you don't, then it will eventually be out in DVD, and at some point it should be able to make its way to Netflix. And remember one very important thing: everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
Awesome! You just made our lives and our childhoods. Thank you so much, Ted.
That's awesome.
Thanks, fellas. I appreciate your time, man, and the interview.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, and good luck with everything, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, awesome. Thank you, bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.